بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وسلم تسليما كثيرا كثيرا. أما بعد, this is the final lecture in the series of lectures that I have been doing called The Way Forward. This is called Problems and Solutions. I thought I should end with a overall broad diagnosis of what I believe are the key issues that we need to address, and also suggest some solutions to that, so that we can then start talking much more granularly and looking at implementation strategies. I want to begin with this beautiful hadith from Ibn Majah from Kitab al-Fitan, narrated by Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu. وقال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم بدأ الإسلام غريبا وسيعود غريبا فطوبى للغرباء. Islam began, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Islam began as something strange, and it will return to being strange. So blessed are the strangers. Gharib, as in Urdu, we have Ajib or Gharib. Gharib doesn't mean poor, it means strange. Why strangers? Because in a world which is based on oppression, courage to stand against the oppression is strange. In a world based on amassing personal wealth, charity is strange. In a world where net worth means dollars, net worth meaning character is strange. In a world ruled by merchants of death, saving lives is strange. In a world where making money is the goal, the means be damned, virtue is strange. Therefore, blessed are the strangers, because they struggle for a world where charity, character, courage, virtue, and kindness will be the standard. And that is Islam. We Muslims today are like those on a sailing ship caught in a storm. As the captain of such a ship, there are two paradoxical things that you must be able to do simultaneously well. Be aware of the forces that are trying to sink you, as well as be disconnected enough from them to be able to focus on the best way to navigate your way out of the storm. If you ignore the forces around you in order to focus, they will sink you. If you get distracted by what the forces throw at you and lose focus on your goal, that will sink you just as fast. Time is of the essence, and urgency is a competitive advantage. That is the difficulty. How to be aware yet emotionally disconnected. Emotional reactions, no matter how justified, always lead to bad decisions. Sira is the answer. So at Hudaybiyah, the Treaty of Hudaybiyah and the incident surrounding it is Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's master class in dealing with this dichotomy. First, a quick essential history lesson. The proliferation of nation states started after World War II. That is a reference point for us to understand that the nation state, as we know it, is still very much a work in process project and is by no means complete. I have given the link to a very interesting and very good article on this issue of evolution of nation states and their role in the future. Add to this the complexity of the multinational corporations, the MNCs, some of which are wealthier than many nation states. Amazon, at 1 trillion, which it was in 2018, would be number 17 in rank if it were a country in terms of GDP. And therefore, what such companies and those who own them can do to impact global politics is a very important aspect to consider. Given the increasingly important and powerful role of online technology, including AI, and the enormous resources that these companies wield, it would be extremely naive to imagine that they wouldn't want to influence present and future markets. This will lead to a new form of colonialism which will be far more pervasive, insidious, and powerful than anything we have seen in the past. Here, people's minds will be the playgrounds, and we will voluntarily allow them to use our minds to make profit for their owners. Facebook and Instagram members are already doing this. More will follow. The nation state idea differs from empires principally because for the first time common people were given a voice in lawmaking. Like all work in process projects, it is far from perfect, but from our perspective as common people, it is a very big step in our development, which must be cherished and supported. The alternative is dictatorship. The biggest strength in times like this is to have a historical perspective and as clear an idea as possible about the best way forward. To do that effectively, we must be prepared to face facts squarely without any sugarcoating. If you can't diagnose the disease, you cannot prescribe or implement the cure. And you cannot diagnose with your eyes blindfolded. So here's a no praise, no blame view as I interpret the history of our people. You may not be interested in politics, but politics is interested in you. It's your choice. Let me choose 3 core areas to analyze broadly and suggest alternatives: education, leadership, and Muslim society. To start with education, the biggest calamity that happened to education was the separation of religious education from modern education as 2 completely separate things. It happened originally long back, first after the brutal suppression of Muslims in Baghdad in the 13th century, and then Al-Andalus in 1791, and India in 1857, and the genocide of ulama in all places, but continued primarily because teachers in madaris didn't know science, math, or English. English, whether we like it or not, is the language of global communication today. Without English, the doors of much of the world remain shut, no matter how learned or creative you may be. Thus, the gulf between Islamic and other knowledge was established and grew. The same restriction of curriculum and teaching methodology happened in the Arab world with similar results. Regular schools removed all reference to the Creator, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and taught science as if there was no creator, while madrasas taught the Quran as if there is no creation. Roughly from the 18th century onwards, Muslims lost the race of scientific discovery and invention and are not even contenders anymore. The so-called golden age of Islamic science from the 8th to the 15th century took place in centers throughout the Islamic world, such as Al-Andalus in Spain, the Near East, Central and West Asia, Turkey, and India. In contrast, since 1900, only 2 Muslims were awarded the Nobel Prize in Science in Chemistry. And in the same period, from 1900 to 2010, over 200 Jews earned and won the Nobel Prize in Science. We satisfied ourselves by talking about the glorious past and forgot that it is the present which matters and which impacts the future, not the past. This situation continues and each passing year compounds it. What is required is not scientific or Islamic education in isolation, but both in consonance, each building on and supporting the other. It is bridges which must be built. The task is monumental and so must be addressed in a highly focused manner. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala taught us this in the Quran. He said, إِنَّ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَاخْتِلَافِ اللَّيْلِ وَالنَّهَارِ لَآيَاتٍ لِأُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ الَّذِينَ يَذْكُرُونَ اللَّهَ قِيَامًا وَقُعُودًا وَعَلَى جُنُوبِهِمْ وَيَتَفَكَّرُونَ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ رَبَّنَا مَا خَلَقْتَ هَذَا بَاطِلًا سُبْحَانَكَ فَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in Surah Al-Imran, which means in the creation of the heavens and the earth and the alternation of the night and the day, there are signs for people of intelligence. These are people who remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala standing, sitting and lying down, which means in every aspect of their life. And Allah used the preposition wow. وَيَتَفَكَّرُونَ. And He didn't say aw, He didn't say or, this or that. No, He said this and that. And who do this and who reflect and research and invent and work in the area of the creation of the heavens and the earth. يَتَفَكَّرُونَ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. And they think and they reflect and they research in the creation of the heavens and the earth. The result of this, these two together, and the sequence, recognize the Creator first and then research in the creation, produces رَبَّنَا مَا خَلَقْتَ هَذَا بَاطِلًا سُبْحَانَكَ فَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. O my Rabb, O my Lord, O my Creator, you have not created all this in vain. All this is not an accident. This is the result of your desire and your design. I glorify you. Glorified are you. Subhanak, faqina adhaban. And save me from the hellfire. Save me from punishment. Automatically, the heart of the person is drawn towards his Creator. And he remembers that one day he will meet him. The sense of accountability, which is the essence of being a Muslim. Allah taught us the sequence of how to teach. And He told us that Islamic knowledge, which is fikr about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, taqwa, and fikr fi samawati wal ard, which is scientific knowledge, are not juxtaposed against each other. They are not antagonistic. They are part of a sequence. And that flow must go in this direction. First recognize the Creator, then look at the creation. An outcome of our approach to Islamic teaching, which is this fractured way, and our blind, unquestioning support for ulama, led to increasingly divisive versions of Islam, supported by convenient interpretations of the Quran and the Sunnah by each sect. Ulama felt and continue to feel very insecure unless they have blind loyalty of their followers, for which each sect promotes the idea that only their way is the right way and everything else is false and leads to the hellfire. We have learned to live with this dichotomy of beliefs and ideas. This is the classic description of hypocrisy, of nifaq. The situation is beyond ridiculous. It is shameful and dangerous. We have 1400 years of history to prove this. How much longer we choose to let this continue is in our hands. And to Allah we will answer. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us to be united and not to form divisions and sects. He said, وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا وَاذْكُرُوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكُمْ إِذْ كُنْتُمْ أَعْدَاءً فَأَلَّفَ بَيْنَ قُلُوبِكُمْ فَأَصْبَحْتُمْ بِنِعْمَتِهِ إِخْوَانًا وَكُنْتُمْ عَلَى شَفَا حُفْرَةٍ مِّنَ النَّارِ فَانْقَذَكُم مِّنْهَا كَذَلِكَ يُبَيِّنُ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ آيَاتِهِ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَهْتَدُونَ. Allah said, which means that hold firmly to the rope of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Hold firmly to Islam, hold firmly to your faith, hold firmly to the rope of Allah, and do not be divided. Allah said, لا تفرقوا. Allah did not say لا تختلفوا. He didn't say don't disagree on matters. By all means disagree, but do that in the best possible way, with the focus on coming to a better understanding of the matter, not of putting somebody down. So Allah said, and hold firmly to the rope of Allah and do not be divided. Remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's favor upon you when you were enemies, and then He united your hearts So you, by His grace, became brothers. You were at the brink of a fiery pit, and He saved you from it. This is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes His revelations clear to you so that you may be rightly guided. We recite the ayah melodiously and explain it eloquently. And then we preach sectarianism without any thought about what we will say to the one who commanded us to be united. We talk about adab al-ikhtilaf, the etiquette of disagreement, but don't practice those. We don't know how to disagree without being disagreeable. And we pay the price in blood, loss of influence, angst, and frustration. Second issue is leadership. Conflicts in leadership started early, within 30 years of the passing away of Rasulullah ﷺ, and continue to this day. It is not in the scope of this lecture to go into the details of the conflicts, and certainly not my intention to go into the rights and wrongs of it. But I want to say that it is essential to study history objectively and unemotionally and extract lessons. We must learn to differentiate between critiquing and criticizing. You critique the incident, you criticize people. We must critique incidents and extract lessons. Criticizing people is not our intention, nor do we have the authority to do so. Critiquing, however, is essential to all learning. Without that, you repeat mistakes at ever-increasing cost. The only use of history is to learn lessons. Critiquing is how you do it. Empire became our default, which led to several attitudes which remain and which must be addressed and corrected. We see these reflected in our organizations and cultures, though the last Muslim empire ended in 1927. Our default preference is autocratic leadership with zero tolerance for dissent. You see this in every organization, every Muslim organization that I can imagine. Blind loyalty gets precedence over competence. Competence and leadership ability are seen as threats and suppressed or eliminated. We have no succession planning, as leadership is for a lifetime. Elections are either a sham or a popularity contest, which in a leadership context makes no sense. Popularity is neither proof nor substitute for competence and ability. Both consciously and unconsciously, ulama and umara, theologians and kings, fueled and promoted sectarian politics. Leadership was suspect and brutally suppressed. Leadership education was and is, in the Muslim world, taboo. Consequently, the quality of leadership deteriorated steadily. Apart from the rivers of blood that our history is colored with, there was a steady decline in leadership quality, academic excellence, scientific development, and consequently, Muslim contribution to the world, and therefore a decline in Muslim influence and power. The world respects and listens to contributors and users, consumers. When Muslims slipped from being contributors to consumers, they became a commodity to be used. Which brings us to our present state, where despite being 1 in 4 in terms of population, we are like foam on the flood, without weight or value, to be ignored, exploited, and discarded at will. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that He sent us for the benefit of people, to teach them how to live a life of virtue and goodness, compassion and justice. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's book is witness. Whether for or against us is for us to decide and work for. Allah said, كنتم خير أمة أخرجت للناس تأمرون بالمعروف وتنهون عن المنكر وتؤمنون بالله. Allah said, you are the best community ever raised for humanity. You encourage good, you forbid evil, and you believe in Allah. Third point, Muslim society. To use transactional analysis terminology, the parent-child ego state was and is the preferred norm of Muslim society. vis-a-vis our leaders, and all attempts to develop the adult ego state, to become independent, to have autonomy and personal authority are repressed. It creates in us a tendency to blame others for our situation, be it local or global. Just listen to our conversations and you will almost never hear statements owning responsibility for our problems. The rule of life, however, is that only owners can change what they own. If you don't own it, you can't change it. So if we do not take ownership of our problems, we condemn ourselves to living with them in perpetuity until we decide to accept responsibility. This is our single biggest problem and the biggest cause of our dismal and very painful state as a nation. We must not allow what is not in our control to prevent us from doing what is in our control. We come to solutions. There is no example better than the example of Rasulullah ﷺ, deriving lessons from his seerah, from his example. There are 4 things that we need to do urgently. Number 1, unity. It's time to stop paying lip service to unity and actively work to promote it. Stop preaching or supporting those who preach divisions and sectarian politics. Reject anyone who tells you to hate anyone, especially another Muslim. History is history. Don't let it color your present. Learn the lesson, but remember that what happened in a different time and place and with different people, not the one you must work with today to solve problems that affect all of us. Remember that whatever be our aqidah, we have critical, even existential problems that are common to all Muslims. I'm not talking about reconciling different ideologies or aqidas or converting anyone. That is impossible and it is unnecessary. There is no need for that. I am talking about working with people with different ideologies. That is possible and critical. Leave the aqidah to Allah. We must work with others here or we will perish. It is as simple as that. Number 2, a central fund. No long-term strategic planning can be done without an assured source of funding. Sporadic charity is not sufficient. In Islam we have zakat, but the use of zakat funds is strictly governed by the Quran. Therefore, I propose that a separate fund be created to which every Muslim man, woman and child must contribute a small amount every month. A small amount actually every day. This is where we can leverage our numbers, where the compounded result will be significant. To give you an example, just the price of 1 cup of coffee per day, that is $5, cumulative for 10,000 people for the year amounts to $18,250,000 in 1 year. If it's 5,000 people, we are talking about $9 million. Are we ready to do this? Every one of us. $5 a day, that's all it takes. And you can ask yourself what you can do with 9 million or 18 million for the year. Number 3. So unity, central fund. 3, education. As I mentioned, we need an education system that bridges the gap between theology and science. Add to this education in manners, ethics, values, morals, leadership, communication, conflict resolution, and the whole host of critical life skills that do not form part of our school curricula. It is out of the scope of this lecture to go into details, but I will suffice to say that it is all doable, enjoyable, and eminently possible if we have the will. We must feel the urgency of the situation and pull together as one if we are to succeed. Number 4, collective leadership structure, collaborative leadership structure. This consists of 2 major things. One is the structure itself, where leaders must have fixed terms of leadership and a critical to success assignment to develop successors. Success depends on developing successors better than we are. Not equal to us, definitely not less than us. Better than we are. The big challenge will be to break out of our feudal mindset and embrace collaborative leadership. The second part of this is the process of decision making. We must practice the Shura method, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded and which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam practiced. And he taught us. This automatically supports successor development and builds good interpersonal relationships. I must sound a warning in advance. We are talking about rewriting the destiny of the Ummah. It will take time, tears before Allah, patience, and investment of every kind. Be prepared for pushback from current leadership because they will feel threatened. But they and we must fear the day of no return, the day of judgment, when we will meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and we will be asked, what did you do? وصلى الله على نبي الكريم وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.